Okay, using the mix of bleached sand and antique gold. And if you've painted your star and everything in the soft black already, don't worry if you get some on them, they can touch up. So I dry brush to give it a little bit of a shimmer. Now I'm going to take my 0 round, or a liner, whichever you prefer, whichever you can find.
This one?
Got it.
Oh, the liner.
And we need to have raw sienna. There it is. I'm ready for that too. Okay, so I'm going to streak raw sienna coming from the outer edges of my bell, the rim. And then I'm going to take antique gold. And I'm going to streak that from the middle. So we know we want to have these paints out and ready because we want to work with them while they're wet, right? So I streak that into the raw sienna. So because I was behind the ball, I'm just going to grab a bit more raw sienna, streak it in so it's wet. And the antique gold, again, coming from the outside in. Then I'm going to just streak a little tiny bit of our mix in the middle. And that's going to give it an even brighter highlight. If you prefer to use a liner, you can use your liner. So it just pops it up and brightens it a bit. Then we're going to do some cross hatch marks. So you take your liner, and that's like what we do with our pen and ink. So I'm just gonna do a couple of lines like that. And do you see how that implies that we've got a shiny part?
What color is that?
That's our mix again.
Mix, yeah.
I'm gonna put a bit more mix in the middle again because it faded right into there. So there, now once I paint my little centers, they'll look great. So we're shading with the mix that we made, raw umber bittersweet. And we're going to shade along the top 1/4 inch. Along there, I'm going to turn and shade behind his eyes. Now this one here, I can't shade there because it's wet still. So I'll get that out of there. So I'm going to just use my heat gun. There. So now I can go ahead and I'm following my picture there. And I'm going to shade behind the eye. So that was shading up here. Behind the eye. You can, if you have that base coated in there, you can shade in there. It doesn't really matter if you do or don't. I'm going to shade with my 1/4 inch still and our burnt umber raw umber mix along the back of the ear, then move inwards and shade there. So it's paint out, water in. And then we have a little mouth underneath his chin, and we're going to shade there. Paint up, water down. I'm going to shade. Now, in your line drawing, you'll have seen these markings that are kind of dotted. So I'm just going to float this mix along the bottom and walk it up. So we're creating that kind of a muzzle. Okay? I came up a little high with it, but we're also going to float along the edge of our ear. And then with what's left on my brush, I don't want to do with a lot of paint. With what's left on my brush, I'm just going to come along the bottom of the lip. So we've got this scuffed little, I just went over it with too much water here. Removed it. And we're going to dry it. I'm taking my 1/8 dome stippler and I'm going to dry brush with our mix. And we're going to dry brush right down. We dried our stuff that we just put on. We're going to dry brush right into there. Dry brush up beside his eyes and then in the middle of his forehead. Just come out nice and soft. This is all rounding. Do you see how that rounds his cheeks out and it rounds, pardon me, out his forehead? We're putting a little bit more in the mouth area. So I'm going to take my bleach sand warm white mix. I've thinned it down. And you see how I'm going to pull little lines coming out from here. Now these are fur lines. They're not little whiskers. We're going to have some up on the ear as well. So you need to make sure that you're thinning down your mixture. And I use my liner standing straight up. That's important. And the fur and the whisker lines are being pulled, remember, the direction that you see in your photo. It's hard to see which way the little white ones are going. I'm just putting them over top of where we've done this white, and they kind of get hidden in the end with our nose and everything else. So, but you do want them there, and you want some up here in that light bright area on the forehead. So I'm going to add some from there. I'm going to try to tip this. No, I can't. So it's nice and thin, and we're going to pull little hair. Whether they're called hair on them or fur, I'm not sure. But we're going to pull those that direction, and then we're going to be going into our brown. Okay, so we're going to start with the thin down. You can see up there, my hand kind of covers it a bit. And we're going to just following the direction. That's important. You pull your hair following the direction. Now I don't want there to be a stop mark where the white stops, so I do want to pull those little hair down into it a little bit so that they just kind of fade away. Same thing here. I'll pull a few little brown ones up into the white hair, and then they're going to come from above there as well. So we're going to continue. You'll be going back and pulling a few more white ones and a few more brown ones back and forth. So you're going to just continue. Some up on the ear. And you want the brown to lean into the white so that you don't have a start and stop line. You'll see what I mean as you go. All right, so I'm going to continue, pardon me, carrying the little hair, and you want them to go off on top of the bell a bit. Got to put some more white in there. So I'll just carry on and bring some of the brown down into there. Same thing on the other side. So I'm going to be dry brushing. I'm going to take a little of the burnt umber. I'm using a 1/8 lunar blender, and I'm going to dry brush up in the top where the dark is and just fade it down into the white. If you feel like you need a little bit more in your ears, and this is the brown mix, if you need a little more inside the ear where we shaded the burnt umber, you can do that. So all of this, I'm just using this small brush and dry brushing. And you see how it's going to soften where the brown comes into the white. I can even go in the mouth. Then I'm going to take the white, and it's the white mix that we used with our lining, and I'm going to come into the areas that we had the light, where we dry brushed originally. But this is nice and soft. This is where we're going to put our cheeks as well. So we want to make sure that we have a little bit of a whitish background for those cheeks. I'm going to come into the center where my little tiny white marks are from my hair, and dry brushing that softens all of that up so that you don't have that overpowered feeling there. So do you see how that has softened up all of that fur? And you're, like I say, you've got your brown mix. I can come in different areas if I want a little bit more brown. It was dark right above the nose, so I want to make sure that that stays dark. So you can still see your little tiny fine lines that we've pulled in there. And now we're going to take and we're going to put our cheeks on. So we have Terra Coral, and I'm still just using the little 1/8 lunar. You want a nice tiny brush. If you don't have one like that, a rect filbert, a little number 2 filbert would be perfect, because those get wrecked so quick and easy. And I'm going to dry brush for where his little nose is going to go as well. And then you can take your mix and you can just pull those little lines to create his nose. So we're going to shade behind our nose with our 1/4 inch. Behind our eyes, pardon me. So this is just right here with our brown mix.
I think I did that already. That's a brown mix?
Shade behind the eyes. Okay, so I'm going to side load, float, burnt umber along the bottom of the eyes. Oh, the camera. Okay, I'm going to float burnt umber, paint down, water up, and it's hard to see, but as it dries you will see. Now I stayed a little bit away from the edge so that you get to see the side on the piece. And now I'm going to repeat on the top side with warm white. You can go with your mix if you want. That'll be just fine if you still have your mix. And it's not very much. And when I float on an eye like a highlight, I always blot with my finger afterwards. So I do a float, whoops, and you have to have the paint up. I must have flipped the brush. Okay, paint up, water down, do my little highlight float, blot with my finger. Okay, so we're gonna add some highlight dots on the eye. And I'm using my mix because I have it handy still. Then we're going to use black, and we're going to do our eyelashes. And if you need to outline, you can go ahead and outline. It just depends how far over you came with your float, you know? Like if you need a little crisper black there, you can do that. And we're adding little eyelashes off to the sides. This eye I can outline around, it needs a bit. All right. With thinned neutral gray, I'm just going to take and dot some of the little whisker holes. We don't want to use a stylus, they're going to be too pronounced.